corporate levy. For fiscal year '25, we are requesting $19,125,000. Right, for tax year '25, I apologize. Good, very good. Fiscal year '24, what was levied was $18,529,522. You can see the year-to-year variance on screen and also in your green PowerPoint presentation, page 2. The pension levy, also you can see there was an increase in that. We are leveling $8 million for presentation.
Oh,
I don't have that.
okay. You want to turn that on? Oh, I'm sorry, John.
That's right.
I'm good, I have it on the.
It's not in here. That's right.
Page 2. You can see the firefighters' pension. We are requesting a $7.4 million levy for fiscal year '26's budget for tax year of 2025. The debt service levy, and then the subtotal being $40,318,928. And then the library property tax levy request is $11 million from that perspective. A total of $52,297,928 that we are requesting for tax year of 2025. That is an overall 4.98% change for 4.9% change for this year.
Could I ask my question?
Please.
I think the last meeting it was mentioned that the village share of the total tax levy in the village is like 15%.
That's correct.
That seems to be growing over the years. 15 years ago, it was like 11.5%. Is that the case?
Over the years, I believe it is growing.
Okay.
We definitely need to do some data to look at that.
Okay. I just remember
You're right.
like
Yeah.
15 years ago, it was
Right.
11.5 or something like that.
Right, and it has grown some, but we can give you the data for that.
Is that an expectation that we're going to continue on that trajectory that will be?
Let me get back to you on that one. Because
Okay.
we did do some projections, and I want to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. It's also the proportion, right, of the,
Right.
so it's all the other taxing bodies.
Well, I was talking about our portion of it.
Right,
Is,
yeah.
is expanding relative to the other.
Relative to everyone else, right,
Right.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Going on to slide number 3, we're talking about here about what is requested for the budget. Total sources are our revenue sources and total uses are our expenses. You can see that we do have a requested budget of $96,377,837. That is a decline from fiscal year '25 requested budget, which was $114 million. So how are we going to acquire the funds for this? On page 4. On page 4, you can see how the breakdown is of how we've arrived at the $96 million. The 2026 requested budget is made up of property taxes, other taxes, licenses, and fees. As you can see, the denominations and the dollar amounts that are actually attributed to each source from that perspective, compared to 2025's requested. And for a pictorial perspective, page 5 gives you an idea of the pie chart as to where the sources of revenue are coming from. Now pause for a moment for individuals to take a look.
On the other taxes, how are we trending in terms of, as we approach the end of the year? Are we on track? Generally, at this year, are we going in a good fashion?
We do know that there's going to be some delay in receiving those taxes, not only from Cook County, but potentially from the state too, in terms of how that money is coming forward. We expect a delay on that, but in terms of trending.
Fees, services, everything, other sources, are they all
They're pretty much in line. We are seeing that some of the taxes are going down. Of course, for the motor fuel tax, you do see a decline in that because more people are moving to the EV. But then the other side of it, the natural gas tax is actually going up a little bit from that perspective. So you do have some offsetting entries from those perspectives.
So in good shape generally.
We'd always like more, sir. I'm being honest. Okay. Moving on to how we anticipate using the budget. These are for the general funds. As you can see, primarily our biggest expense is personnel services, which are salaries for our individuals. That makes up almost a third of our overall request from that. Fringe would be your healthcare, your dental, your IMRF contributions, et cetera. That is for non-public safety individuals. Fringe makes up the next biggest portion of our overall usage of funds. Then finally, interfund transfers, and then contractual services. Yes, sir.
Full-time equivalency
Yes, sir.
employees. How has that changed over the years? What do we have, how many do we have now? Or how many does this budget support?
We are budgeting, I believe it's 409, if I'm correct in that number. I defer to my colleague in Human Resources, and I know she is quickly looking that up, but I believe it's 409 or
So-
412.
Something like that.
Yes, sir.
Is that also something that's trending up
We
in terms
have
of more
seen
personnel?
small percentage increases, not significant, sir.
I think that's accurate. I think that's accurate. So I think, we've added some positions related to sustainability and equity over the last few years.
Again, thinking back, because that's where my history
Yeah.
is. It was like 341 15 years ago.
Well, I think if you go a little bit further back prior to the Great Recession, it was probably 460 something, right? So there were over 100 positions that were lost in the village at some point as part of the Great Recession and some other financial challenges the village had at that time.
When you say
think-
lost,
Yeah, cut. Yeah, we can produce
because
that data.
we
Yeah.
didn't have the money, or we didn't?
Probably. I'm assuming
Okay.
so with the recession and how the resources were being managed at that time. But the recession hit Oak Park, like many communities, really hard. And there were some very serious cuts here at the village.
Okay.
So the workforce is not anywhere near where it used to be pre-Great Recession.
Okay, thank you.
Just to answer an earlier question, I went back and looked, and 15 years ago, in 2010, the village made up 20.9% of the overall levy.
Wow, I would,
It was over. It was over 20%. Most of from 1999 through 2019. So it's fallen greatly because of the 3% levies that happened for a number of years, and the 0% levy, while other folks were levying the maximum they could.
What's fallen?
Or the share of the overall levy that's
20%.
attributable to the
Almost
village.
as much as School District 97, but 27%.
So
I don't,
I pulled up a spreadsheet that had all the and calculated. So I didn't populate the spreadsheet, but from the data I'm seeing, it looks like it was 20%.
Except
Ali
we have some
Elsevier.
staff that have been here quite some time that anecdotally, I think even tonight could probably corroborate that. But I think we can follow up with the data to actually support that.
great, thank you.
I know Ali Elsevier keeps that for every single year.
Yeah, I can call him tomorrow.
And then once again, pictorial in terms of how the funds are actually being utilized. May I take any questions, ma'am?
Okay, any questions on the presentation? Brian?
I guess just sort of confirming what I'm reading here. The largest driver of the of the levy increase being 4.96% is the pension levy, because the corporate levy's 3.21. It's the rest of it's all pension,
Yes,
additional
sir.
pension costs.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, that, it frames the discussion, I think, for us, because that corporate levy number is sort of the discretionary spending of the village. So we're looking at a 3.21% increase in the discretionary spending. The rest of the increase is entirely driven by
Public safety.
pension levy. And it's, it's one of the discussions we had last year, where our corporate levy actually was staying flat or going down to be able to accommodate sticking to a 3% levy increase, because I believe you had told us last year that was largely driven by the 0% levy increase we did a few years ago, and so as a result, for us to stay at 3%, it was requiring a decrease in the corporate levy, which is functionally a decrease in services, because the pension levy isn't going to services or other sort of anything along those lines. So I think that this sort of impacts how I'm thinking about this budget, because we are looking at just a 3.2% increase to the discretionary spending. And so part of it is, we've got these pension obligations, and there's not a whole lot we can do about that.
But that number doesn't include some of the things we're looking to increase as of recent weeks.
This,
It doesn't include the 150,000?
Unfunded.
Yeah, the unfunded
The
150,000.
living room, the sustainability
ability.
fund, and firefighters.
Right.
yeah,
It doesn't
understood.
include
Things that we have not added into the budget are not included in this
Yes.
number. Understood.
Correct.
that. So I just wanted to make a point, since you brought that up, Trustee Straw. If you want to leave the levy at 3%, I calculate that the corporate levy will go down by $155,000 to balance it, to make it 3%.
So I also, just quickly, I just want to point out, to round out Trustee Straw's point, so healthcare is what, 9% increase, so that the corporate levy increases by 3.1.
3.21.
2.21%.
IMRF went up.
But healthcare costs are up 9%. We account for COLAs in the corporate levy as well. So you can see the efficiency with which we work through the budget process to account for those spikes, but yet still there's only an increase at 3%. So I think it's an important point. And then while I have the mic, I just want to confirm the numbers for the total FTEs in FY25. We're at 403.25, and proposed for FY26, 405.5, and that includes the 7 trustees.
Okay. Jim, you had a question?
Just a comment, which is, Brian's correct. This levy the corporate levy portion is increasing by 3.21%, but to be clear, when we had previous levies, I don't recall cutting services. Did you cut services in the last few years that I'm aware of? Significant cuts? I'm saying is, it's our job, I'm trying to make a point, it's our job as fiduciaries to, if that's the case, look at the other components of the budget holistically and try to work them down a little bit, defer things, work things into a more agreeable schedule. And yes, we want to fund some things that are important to a lot of people. And to do that and not do it, if we're not going to move on anything else, this is going to be a much higher levy. And that's been my fear all along, is that we wouldn't talk about decreasing the levy, we're gonna actually increase it from the proposal we received, which is unusual. Budgets, you wanna control, they rarely, just start ballooning because people wanna add this or add that. Although, if you wanna do that, and there are values here that we wanna uphold, we need to look at other areas to try to economize, that's all. So that's what I'd like to see ultimately.
Do you have suggestions at this time, or you want to finish talking about potentially what else we're looking for first to add into?
I would prefer that.
Okay,
It's kind of a holistic.
right. Yeah, so largely what we've heard is that this has been an extraordinarily challenging budget season, just with those factors that we can't control. Our pensions, fringe benefits, and such, and that actually what's been brought before us tonight took an awful lot of work to get to this point. And that now the board goals, as Brian is pointing out, are not out of sync with that, but they're in addition to that. So, we do have a number, are there any further questions on the presentation itself?
One other question.
Sure.
Back to the full-time equivalents, what was it last year?
That was what Village Manager Jackson shared, 403.25, is that correct? Yes. And then, 405.5.
That includes the 7 trustees.
So it's three additional.
I can relate to the point that Mr. John Hedges is making, because we both have been, as well as Jim, watching the village for more than 20 years, and it's ebbed and flowed. There was a time when it was quite high, and then there was a point around 2012 that it was a very, the direction was to cut, and from the board at the time. And as well, and then it went back up again, and now we're seeing DEI, sustainability, those board goals that in order to really advance do require staffing. And that we're not part of what we would consider core municipal services in 2017 or earlier. But I do believe that's one of the conversations I've been hearing from my colleagues, is that we do establish at this point that those are core services that we're not willing to cut. And in fact would be looking to make recommendations on how to stabilize that and know that that is not in question in future years. Of course, it's always the case, and also to John's point, that, boards, that direction ebbs and flows. And the pendulum, as you often find yourselves talking about in politics, goes back and forth.
And there's the one issue.
No worries.
There's the one issue that's talked about recently, over the last year or two, is affordability in the community. And a big part of that is how much taxes are collected, because 99% of the people who live in town pay taxes, either to the county or to their landlord. So it affects them directly. So it's just something we have to keep in mind as we go through this, because I think that's a big issue with affordability, making sure people can live here.
And I do think that that's important to, reflect on, as far as in how do we see that happen. It's the aging in communities. It's the people that are, from at least my perspective, is that, are looking to stay in their home. Truth be told, if I didn't own my home, I couldn't be in this position today. And I would be challenged by buying a new home in our community. So while every time somebody leaves, there very much is somebody willing to pay for that home, and at a higher cost. But if we're looking to maintain diversity of all types, including socioeconomic, then it is something that we do need to factor in, as well as quality of life, which is ultimately what this board has continued to try to find a balance of, because much of what is related to the board goals are important to us and are also relatable to that quality of life and the expectation level of services that our residents are looking for and the type of community that they want to live in. And I think many of those who are choosing to age in place here value that as well. So this is no one ever said this was going to be easy. And so what I'm aware of, and I'm going to look for my trustees, the trustees, members of the Finance Committee at Hull to chime in, is that we've got discussion on a living room that was presented to the Finance Committee, and that conversations between the last meeting and this one would, I believe, and again, looking for that confirmation, because this, whatever happens tonight is the recommendation to the full board. And the full board can weigh in and might make some additional changes. But my perception is that there's great support for the living room, at least for this first year, when we heard that we're really looking to identify those additional revenue sources or partner agencies that can contribute at a higher level to decrease that cost to the village. Then you have the Sustainability Fund that was brought up at the last meeting, and there was a recommended cut from staff based on their assessment, but then we're hearing from some of the trustees and members of the Finance Committee that they're looking to put some of that back in, up to $250,000. And then we have the ongoing conversation of a need for additional firefighters. So those three are the conversations to have first about where the consensus is falling on those additions, recognizing that we've already laid the groundwork, that the current budget before us is at nearly 5%, which is higher than the last 6 years or so. Now, but back in the day, when since I've watched, and our levy in Oak Park has been as high as 9 or even double digits. At different times when you saw investment like in the downtown district, or when you saw investment in actually, Pleasant Home district. And we know that we've got challenging years to come and a lot of ongoing conversation around policy for additional revenue sources, as well as how to fund properly and practically the areas of board goals. So on those three, who'd like to start off?
Can I make one comment previous?
Please do.
So I received a response this morning on the fund balance question, because I think that's relevant to how, it could be very relevant to how we discuss this.
Yes.
And in discussing general fund balance, it seems like the end of 25, the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have about 44 million, something, 44, and that includes an earmark for Julian.
42 and then 43 with Julie.
Okay, so 43 million, and it includes the earmark, which for this discussion, you could just kind of lump in because it hasn't been spent, right? So 43 million. And my concern, my question is, what is 2026? I don't know from looking at these documents how it's going to flow forward based on the projected 2026 budget, what that balance was going to be. And that's important to me. So I'd like to know, because that should frame, if we get into this and we start increasing the levy, we need to know if it's going to spend down, to what degree, if at all. So
Right now, the budget is balanced, and if it ends being balanced, it'll still be at 43.
43. But if we add things.
If you add things, then it'll go down. Yes.
And so the degree to which we add may directly impact the fund balance. And
Yes.
I don't know to what extent this flows into our discussion of what we need to borrow, because I was told that it's important to maintain a good fund
Fund
balance.
balance, yes,
Going
it is.
into a situation where we've already now publicly discussed it, possibly acquiring a building and then making a big investment. I want to make sure we're not going to hurt ourselves. And I think I don't know the answer to that.
So when we looked at it last year, it was our 45. We looked at bonding $20 million. And we knew that based on the policy, that it had to be somewhere between 11 and 18 million based on the fund balance policy. So we fell within that policy. Currently, what you've asked is that the 150,000 for the living room would come from the fund balance. The 250,000 would come from the fund balance. And if you want to add anything else, you either take it from the fund balance or increase the levy.
So it's a direct reduction. Is that impactful to you? Do you have a concern about this?
I think we previously discussed it, and I think the Finance Committee has deliberated over this, and I'm glad that Donna brought that up. In the previous meeting, we were directed to, we had the presentation, there was discussion amongst the Finance Committee members, and the direction we received was to take the money from the fund balance and not to levy for it, for the living room project, and to review it on an annual basis and to pursue an agreement that would require the Mental Health Board to attempt to raise funds each and every year over that 3-year period of time to try to reduce the impact. So that's where we landed in the last discussion. Obviously we had it on the list of one of those unfunded requests, so that was in my transmittal, but the Finance Committee took it up, and here we are, so.
I understand. It doesn't have to be, there are a couple different ways to look at it too.
Yeah.
As I said before, I don't know, when we're looking at a budget the size of Oak Parks, we do have discretionary funds, I would think, somewhere where it could be recommended to us, where we come up with a cut that would be equivalent to the amount of money that we're talking about.
Well, I would say this is a flat budget. One of the things that, the indicators that I put out there just even tonight is that we had, healthcare cost increases of 9%. We pay our employees, we increased the COLA, that was respectable, commensurate with previous board policy. And so in essence, we've reduced expenses, and we've done that each and every year before we get bring this budget to you. We work hard to reduce the expenses, and I think what you'll find is that in service delivery, the demand on service delivery is going up in expense, right? And it's not commensurate with the budget increases. So at this point, I think it really is if it's the will of the Finance Committee to cut a service to support the living room project, I think we'll take that direction. Because that's really what it would amount to. There's no fluff in the budget.
In a $200 and some million budget?
No, I wouldn't recommend a fluff. I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend it, and I don't think any of our executive leaders, when they are given direction, they don't even, and I think that the leaders that we have in place right now, they're always constantly looking for efficiencies, and they get direction when we start the budget process to look for efficiencies and ways that we can economize and reduce expenditures. Our finance department does the same thing, and they can speak to that, I think even tonight. So I think what you have is a flat budget operationally that supports the service delivery that the board has invested in heretofore. And if there is an interest in the board directing us to cut those things, then we will look for those cuts.
To me, some of
So
the.
it's just important for me to be clear about that there is a high level of fiscal responsibility coming out of the village administration when we make these recommendations.
And I was just going to make reference to an example on that point. When I consider knowing that our staff is just as committed to sustainability as we are, and they actually recommended a cut to sustainability because of an analysis as to, just practically what they felt like they could spend, then I know that to me that's a sign that everything was looked at and nothing was considered off. But I also think, so maybe we start there. Okay, so what I'm hearing from Jim Taglia is that he's tasking this finance committee with considering of potential cuts, but it does need to come from us. At this point, it can't, it's, you know, the staff has presented what they're going to present, and any recommended cuts would need to come from our way. And they did, at a previous finance committee, present to us some what were potential deferrals within the CIP, and they had them at 3 different stages of 5, 11, or 5, 8, and 12, 15, 13 million dollars. And so I was hoping that if there was, that everyone had taken a second look at those documents between the last meeting and this one, in case there was something that was of consideration, and, you know, just trying to balance the affordability on our resident, but then also make sure that we're moving our board goals and supporting our staff in the way that we need to be a responsible government and a service level to our community. Not, again, not an easy task, and quite honestly, every time we were advancing those board goals, we typically ended the conversation with that knowing that once it came, rubber hit the road at the budget season, that was when we were going to be truly making the decisions behind those. And so the living room, if it's been suggested that can be taken from the fund balance, I do think that is reasonable in that it's a smaller amount, one that it can be in constant conversation with partner agencies right here in our own community where we have a little more control over how that proceeds. Then, you know, so I'd like to hear directly where folks fall on the $250,000 for the sustainability. Noting, I think we can go through that quickly because I've already heard considerable support for it. So, Brian, Jim, if you're looking to confirm or deny. You can make your plea, that's cool.
Well, you know where I stand, yeah. I will, reiterate, I think that, 43 million is in our fund balance right now. I think it makes a lot of sense to, especially because the living room project is a short-term project. It makes sense to use those funds. I don't think it doesn't necessarily make sense to pull from someplace else. So I'm in agreement with that, which is what we discussed at the meeting last time. And then yes, for sustainability, I am also fine with that coming from the fund balance this year, knowing that next year we need to have a deeper conversation about revenue sources for the sustainability fund. We need to structurally change. And I think, Village Manager Jackson, you referred to sustainability is not necessarily considered to be a core service. I believe it is. I think it's something that we need to be sustaining over a very long period of time for us to make the clean energy transition in Oak Park that the rest of the world is going through. So it needs to be if we're going to actually be serious about it. So I'm very interested in finding out ways to make that structurally part of the general fund or find ways that are sustainable to keep that budget going and growing, frankly. We have to do more and we have to go faster, and any dollar we spend today will pay for itself, many times over down the road in the mitigation of climate catastrophe that is upon us. So, but for now, I don't see a need to cut other things to pay for that unless someone has bright ideas. I've been sending lots of annoying emails. I'm sorry, Village Manager Jackson, Donna, for all those emails. But I'm just looking. I'm looking to see what's this, what's that, where can we pull this from? What's this number mean? To try to find places and because that was the assignment that I understood that we left with, right? So that's what I was attempting to do. I'm sure I'll have more. But for now, I'm happy with, again, it's a very large amount in the general fund. I know that the more that's in there, the more interest we make, and there's like a benefit to that, and we're kind of guarding our nest egg, but it is well beyond the recommended minimum, and it has been for a long time, and this is something that folks at OPCAN have talked about for a long time. Why are we holding on to all this money when we could be spending it and putting it to use to invest in our future? So when it comes to climate action. So that would be my recommendation, is to pull the 250 from the fund balance. But I'm also, of course, very much open to suggestions if people have ideas about where to pull it from alternatively.
I just want to say that I'm so grateful that y'all don't keep correcting me every time I say general fund instead of fund balance. You seem to know that we're on the same page, so thank you. Yeah, before I turn it over though, Brian, I was just wondering, I do think that, and right after this, I'd like some explanation, or for the general public, as to like what a healthy fund balance is, why we keep it, the reality that we are also saving for a major spend.
That was going to be my, the question I was going to queue up is, we have a fund balance policy. What, can you remind us all what the range of fund balances we are supposed to be and how we are compared to that?
We're doing very well. Last year, I think that we calculated that we could go down to like 20 million, 21 million. It's good to have a strong fund balance because when you go out to issue a bond, you get cheaper interest rates. One of the reasons why I know that the fund balance is building up, it was going to be used for bigger projects and anything excess over what the fund balance policy was stated, so that we could use the monies that we didn't want to bond for or that we could not bond for. We could use the fund balance without raising the levy.
So the policy, though, it's a specific set of percentages. It's like 6 to 12%. Is that correct?
Yeah, of the expenditures from the prior year.
And right now we're at 20-something%?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm
We're a little higher than that. It was gonna be like 20% when we talked about taking out the 20 million. Because remember, when we first started talking about the streetscape project, we were gonna use the fund balance and then pay ourselves back once we issued the bond.
right. That's right.
Yep.
So I mean, I am not suggesting we should spend down the fund balance like in large part, but I do think especially since we've already been discussing the need for a real focus on revenue sources for sustainability, and we've talked about taking that up and some specific ideas towards that that we can take up in the new year. I think that does make some sense to come from fund balance, and I would say the same for the living room. I think I want, I'm not going to move on to the next topic, but I also want to talk about some of the revenue sources we've started talking about with regards to the firefighters and emergency response, because I think there have been revenue sources that we've already talked about, both with the new state bill regarding response to CTA and things we've talked about with regard to responding to our local nursing homes and similar facilities where if we have repeated calls for invalid assist, we can either reduce burden or increase revenue related to those.
Again, back to the fund balance and also back to the full-time equivalency. So we have 408 or what equivalents right now in the budget. How many of those positions are actually filled? I mean, we have people who have retired, who have left, is there a calculation on what that value is?
In the budget right now, it's showing as a turnover savings of $3 million.
How much?
3 million.
3 million, okay.
For how many positions?
We're working on, so I can get you the total. So that was my response to you today, yeah. So they were gonna we're gonna get you the accurate numbers.
So the fund balance receives $3 million because it's not spent, it stays there.
It offsets the expenses, and so. 'cause
Offset what's the expenses?
We budget for
You don't budget?
everyone. We budget as each department is
Right.
full. And then we have a $3 million savings. So if we have a $3 million savings at the end of the year, then that 3 million go to the fund balance.
Right, okay, that's my,
Yeah.
that was why I was wondering. So there is a kind of a level there of money that is not anticipated to be spent, but will be accumulated into the fund balance.
Yes, but
And
you have
can-
to.
Is that an average year? Does that?
No,
normally
it's a
happen?
little higher this year, but you have to keep in mind, you have 4 budget amendments throughout the year.
Sure,
So that each time you do a budget amendment, it increases the expenses if there's not a revenue source,
but
which
when we're
then
making
will,
the plans for the year, it's there,
at the beginning of the year.
$3 million.
Yes, at the beginning of the year, yes.
At the beginning of the year, right.
Yes,
Okay, and when we may utilize it in some way as the year goes along, but it's
it's there at
it's
the
there to be
beginning.
utilized.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, we have about 45 vacancies right now.
45 vacancies?
Yes.
That's probably more than $3 million.
Police department, the majority of them are in the police
Yeah, I
department.
was gonna say, that's gotta be more than $3 million then, doesn't it?
we do a conservative estimate.
All right,
Yeah, we do a conservative estimate.
okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And some of the policy that we're looking to have in the new year is also any decisions on how some of that, savings can be funneled into some of the fund balances that we know that we need to, or some of the areas like sustainability and others that aren't properly funded right now.
And that's one of the reasons I ask this, because I'm not here, but at some organizations I've known, use that as kind of a, I don't want to say a slush fund, but they used it knowing it's going to show up, that they could then fund programs that weren't necessarily a part of the regular budget.
Yes,
But we.
And I don't think at all that
no,
happens
no.
here, so please.
No, no. And any correlation would have to be some logical as
Right.
well, yeah. Okay, so, yes, Jim, go ahead.
What are we discussing right now?
So, well, right now, what I'm just confirming what I'm hearing. Actually, I don't know that I heard everybody respond to 250 and sustainability yet. Derek has made the case that he believes it should come from the fund balance. You're thinking, you're comfortable
I-
with that
I
at this
agreed.
time? And Jim?
Well,
Go ahead, Jan, I think we need clarification on the
sustainability fund, it's not, she's talking the general fund balance.
I don't know what's the hang up I have with that, but
So the money is currently in the sustainability
Ability
fund?
to fund.
yes.
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 So you're saying a transfer from the general fund to the sustainability?
I think that's what I heard from Derek.
Yes, that is my recommendation.
What is your recommendation?
I will look at the sustainability fund. I have to look. Can you pass me that?
So from,
Took those glasses off. Those-
from the,
That's not a happy.
from the presentation we had on the sustainability, the expenditures, we're gonna decrease the balance by about 50% in the sustainability fund, because right now there's not a funding source that is, that's adequate to support it. And so I think it was going down from like 3.5 to 2 million or something in that range.
Only 1 million, I think, was left
I
at the
think
end
so,
from your presentation, right?
Yeah, correct. We had at the beginning of this fiscal year about 2.9 million. We expect to have, because of the influx that we got last year, about 2.5 million at the end of this year. And then if we spend everything that we said we're gonna spend, that's about 1 million, at the end of 2026.
So I believe the reason Derek's suggesting general fund is while we're talking about how we create a revenue stream to fund the sustainability fund, not driving it down further to 750,000.
Yeah.
Where, there's just gonna be no there, for fiscal year 2027.
Right, and it's also worth noting, I believe staff salaries come out of that fund right now, which is not a very stable feeling, I'm sure.
We could change that.
I would be in support of that.
We need your thoughts on this, because it seems like
So we could make the decision to change the staffing for the for sustainability to come from the general fund. That is an option. That would in essence be doing what we said at the beginning of the meeting and accepting that it's a core municipal service of the village.
Yes.
Is that something, Village Manager Jackson, is that we would need to do in policy in the new year, or is that something that could literally be part of this budget season?
I mean, we didn't, we could do it this budget season. We can add it. It would increase the levy if we did it this budget season. But we're not, this is something that we can actually do too strategically, and we can do it next year.
And then we could use some of that savings. Yeah, sometimes a pause does give us more options. And I think that's something to take into the rest of tonight, because, I know that there's always this looming cloud that if we defer something, is that somehow that means it's not gonna happen. But we are always the decision makers. These are the 7 people we're working with until 2027, which means you have another budget season that y'all have to decide on, the same 7 people, next year. And so I'm hoping that gives some level of security, that these conversations are ongoing, and that the purpose of my expansion of the Finance Committee was that this be a working committee where we're really rolling up our sleeves knowing that we've got more tough decisions to come. And so, John, you're not just here to look pretty.
I hope not.
Of course, we have, as well as Greg Kolar, and for the sake of saying it, he's on every finance committee in the village, and Bridget Edrin with her consulting expertise as we go. It's like, right now, this is the work we've got in front of us, but it's just the beginning. Okay, so, Jim, yes, you gotta tell us how you feel about $250,000.
So I support sustainability. I've voted for the Climate Action Plan. My alternative here would be first of all, I had concerns about, and Lindsay expressed concerns about the capacity to be able to even spend that money. And it came back that if you were able to spend it, and there were more opportunity to spend, you would approach the board, and we would consider a budget amendment at that time. To me, that's a reasonable approach than just moving this money. What I think I'm hearing is from the general fund into the sustainability fund, and it's going to be there. Is that what you're suggesting still? Moving it from the general fund? So if that's the case, this board, you have, first of all, a commitment across the board by all members to do that, to be able to, if the capacity is able to be ramped up and you're able to spend the money, it's the same thing, except it's more conservative because we're not moving money around and depleting the general fund at a time we don't really need to. We shouldn't be doing it. So I think that just to say, if we have the commitment, and I'm committed, I would do that. I'll give you my commitment here tonight, that if we were to approach this from the standpoint of just seeing if there is the need later, and then addressing it at that point through a budget amendment, it's really the same, but it moves the money only when needed, if needed, as opposed to just moving it because. So, I don't know. I mean, you have the commitment of the board, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response to that would be, I know President Skiman likes to refer to the budget as a living document, which maybe not everybody shares that sentiment, but and I believe you. I think that, yes, this board is very much supporting sustainability for the foreseeable cycle. It's also true that the budget is a snapshot in time about a statement of this board's values. And as it currently stands, the sustainability budget is getting a cut of $200,000. And there's only one department that's getting a larger cut, which is development services. So it shows, on paper, what the values are, and I don't agree with a cut to sustainability.
But she recommended it. You recommended a cut.
Under the scrutiny of of what we heard earlier tonight, in that every single department head was asked to bring back as flat of a budget as they could manage, and there was considerable back and forth, as we are now doing also. I mean, Derek can continue, but I think this is also what we're going to hear from our colleagues at the board table when we bring this recommendation forward, is that, when you serve in a role like this, and I'm sure, Jim, you also were at the township, and you have a long history of service, and John, so do you. You were at the Park District as well, as the village. There's a championing of what it is that, what inspired you to run for office, that we're ultimately going to be reckoning with, which I imagine can be a little frustrating for staff, but then they've also been around and seen many boards and know this is how this works. So, we're here tonight to accept not just the reality of how difficult it is to make these decisions, but the reality of the 7 voices at the table. And so I am of a mindset that I do trust that this board would approve that amendment with glowing reviews if it were to come forward. I am also sitting here knowing that amongst the 6 people serving with me, the votes are there for the $250,000, and I'm not looking to make the conversation go longer than it needs to be had, because that's where the political will is. I think that we also will do our due diligence when we bring this to the board table to confirm that that's accurate. And people have to make their statement then, hopefully just once, on why they're voting for the budget that is in front of them. And, but we also should reflect on what that says, otherwise, and make sure that we're, not putting one thing in competition with another unnecessarily. And that's why it is valuable and appreciated that, we do at least reflect on the idea that we could make the amendment at any time. Theoretically, we could be 2 and 2, but I'm very much comfortable also with the moving forward and making it a 3 and 1 right now. I'm guessing that there's going to be an overwhelming support from the 4 that are not here, or the other 3 that are not here, for the support of that. So I'm just going to pose one question at you, so that we know that we've done our due diligence. Is there a compromise? Is there, even to the 200,000 that you said, is that difference in the reduction?
The philosophy behind the 250 specifically is to keep the energy efficiency grant program funded at the same level as it currently is, and not to cut that program.
Okay,
and
fair
that
enough.
250 just happens to put the sustainability budget in the positive instead of the negative.
Okay, Brian?
I think the one thing I'd note is, just as Jim was saying, if we spent the 500 and we needed more, we could go get it. If we are unable to spend more than 500, the leftover funds at the end of the year will roll back into fund balance. And so if, I guess, just sort of making the point, if the commitment is, if we ran out of this money, we would find a way to make this money appear in the budget, that's fundamentally the same as saying, we'll put the money in the budget, and if we don't spend it, it'll roll over to the next year. It's just how, it's whether we're accounting for it or whether we're saying we'll reallocate savings down the road. And so I guess it seems like we're all functionally on the same page. It's just how we want to line it out on the page.
It's absolutely right. But one is contributing to a levy and one's not.
Well, I mean, it's not contributing to a levy because it's coming out of fund
just
balance.
just taking it, so, okay, forgive me, it's all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
anything to add, John?
Well, I was just wondering if it'd make it easier if you made an allocation from the general fund to the sustainability fund. So it's sitting there if in fact you decide you want to use it, rather than, or maybe that's what you're going to do.
Well, I do think that what we heard is we'd like to, for the future, fund the staffing of the sustainability department from our fund balance, so that we know that the dollars that then are in the sustainability fund itself are concentrating on those programs that are contributing to our crop plan. And then that's just one step in stabilizing, but we still are gonna have to identify additional revenue sources to get to our goals. But, you know, I think why I turned to you is because we do wanna be honest in our budget, you know, like.
What's that mean?
Yeah, okay, so that's what I'm hearing. And I do think that it's important that when we bring this to the full board, that we present it with the transparency of the arguments that, or not the arguments, the perspectives that have been shared tonight, okay? I don't know how, if that's for us to do, meaning that we highlight for our colleagues the decisions we've made and why.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
We talk about the living room too?
And, please.
Well, you know my position. I
I
don't
do.
want to say it a third time, but I do think that, I will give you a 30-second view of it. I think it's a township ask. It should have been, we didn't attend a meeting in January, and the outcome of that meeting was the village is supposed to come up with $150,000 a year for 3 years. That's a meeting, it was unfortunate that we missed because it cost, potentially $500,000. I think it should be properly with the township. And I won't belabor it other than saying, I would wish they would step up as an organization, as a group, and approach this with, because this is directly in their core mission, and it is directly related to what they're supposed to do, and it isn't for us. So I do think it would be good, but given the circumstances, the opportunity here is to either add to our levy or take out of our fund balance. And facing those two things, I guess we would have to take it out of the fund balance. Is that what you're suggesting?
It is.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would think that's the lesser of two evils, perhaps. But it really is not. We're crossing into areas where personally, we should stay mostly in our lane. This is a totally different lane for us in a way, although it does mirror some of the things of ECHO. It just seems like they have the money. They've got 2.7 million, of which 1 point some is unallocated. It's just sitting there, and this is what they do, and we're not hearing a word. So, thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, I find myself, in the middle, so to speak. In that I have often shared that I believe that we've got some work, the work that we're doing can overlap with the township. But I think the answer is collaboration, because we have to have buy-in from both of us, to see some of these programs be successful, similar to the early childhood collaboration. You see the Village, D97, and D200 all investing in a program so that that the buy-in is there for that village-wide community spirit of every child from cradle to career. We all play a piece in their success, okay? So, programs like support of many of our partner agencies, from Housing Forward to the Housing Authority to, a program like the Living Room. There's a buy-in that, now, but what that percentage should be, I think that's where the ongoing debate is, and where I see your point, and I think that percentage could be discussed further with the township, and then maybe there's even other partner agencies, including, I've researched a little bit the living rooms that exist elsewhere, and almost entirely they're state funded. So we know that's the goal. But we want to see, that in as many ways as possible, we're working together. So I do think that skin in the game, it just encourages that partnership, because you have an investment into it succeeding.
That's a good point. Thank you for saying that. I think that is important. Currently, we're funding this at 15 times the amount of the township, which is this huge disparity. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I agree. And perhaps we need to focus on that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. But at the end of the day, I think the program is good for the community at large.
And the township budget is also much, much smaller than ours.
But they have a giant reserve. Relative.
And just like we have a significant,
Is this a township, or a program that the township brought forward?
so the Community Mental Health Board, Cheryl Potts, who presented to you the other day, you know that she ultimately is part of the township.
Right, so it
And
was
so-
essentially a township program.
That's true. And the Community Mental Health Board investment is more on par with what we're contributing. At least, especially for that first year, because I think they've got some structural additional costs that they're putting in. Okay. So those two are done then, right? Okay, so then who'd like to lead the conversation on the firefighters? You've been a little quieter than usual tonight, Brian.
I can't imagine why.
Nothing else.
So.
We're so happy to have you here.
So I think that given all of the conversations that have gone on around this, there's been a discussion that if we were to do the 9 that the local proposed, that would require adding 3 lieutenants. I mean, I think there's a further discussion to be had at some point about, well, you could hire 9 and elevate 3 lieutenants from within the department, so you're at the increase of 9 in staffing instead of increasing by 12. But I think, given that the department is down 4 positions right now, an increase of 6, likely that's going to be all the capacity that would exist for hiring in the new year. I believe the numbers that were brought forward would be that the increase of 6 was about 685 in budget impact, and so I do think it would be helpful to have a conversation about some of the revenue opportunities that exist around the fire department in the new year, both around the bill passed at the state level that provides funding related to responses to service at CTA stations, CTA and Metra, and those invalid assist, because I think there are a lot of revenue opportunities that go directly to our fire and EMS services, and could offset a lot of those costs, especially because I think even when we had both the local and the Baker Tilly folks here, and we asked about if you increase staffing without increasing minimum staffing levels, would that impact overtime? And both the local and Baker Tilly agreed it would. Baker Tilly only said overtime would not be impacted by hiring if you made an increase in minimum manning standards that was commensurate with that hiring. So I think when we're talking about adding 6 positions, there's readily available opportunities to make that revenue neutral between expected decreases in overtime and increases in revenue.
Trustee Straw, President Scaman, committee members, on the firefighter question, staff would like to offer a perspective. If the Finance Committee wants to make a recommendation to add firefighters, and so too does the board, we actually would like to offer some assistance with a recommendation on how that might occur, and still give us an opportunity in the near future to assess the impact as well as identify potential offsetting revenue. And it's kind of similar to kind of the conversation around sustainability is not completely structurally funded, where there's a commitment, yet we are looking at, we need to spend the time to figure out how to strategically do it and to structurally fund the operation. So there's some comparability to that, as well as some of the other things that we have on our list that are unfunded. But we're talking about the firefighters, and so we just wanted to offer a perspective and a recommendation. And so I'm going to ask Kira to do that for us tonight.
Okay, so staff issued a memo dated November 6th, 2025, to provide the analysis to the Finance Committee regarding the cost of firefighter paramedic additions, because there was some discrepancy between what the local was presenting and Baker Tilly in terms of that cost. So we did our own analysis to reflect the actual cost based on starting pay, and then took those firefighters into their 3rd year of employment with the village, just to give a sense of what that would be on an annual basis. And so that's something that is available to all of you that was issued previously. Based on that analysis, so the addition of 6 firefighter paramedics, that total cost is about $700,000 in year 1, which would be an increase to the levy that's currently proposed by about 1.78%, which we do see as significant, given your goals at maintaining the levy at under 5% where you currently are, or just not continuing to build upon the existing expenses and create kind of that structural imbalance moving forward. We also recognize the board's goals and interests around this issue, and we do understand that there are potential revenues that may become available to the village, whether it is through that CTA calls for service bill or other programming that has not yet been defined and fully explored. So what we recommended in that memo, but that I can go into a little bit further, is the idea of committing in 2026 to an overhire of positions in the fire department at a level of 3, 6, or 9, or sort of whatever the board's interest is. And so what an overhire would do, and this is something that the board has previously done in terms of passing an overhire ordinance, is it would allow for the village to hire in excess of the budgeted FTEs for a period of time. And typically this is done in the public safety context when it comes to savings due to potential or planned retirements or long-term leaves of absence that result in the village needing to call in for overtime to fill the minimum staffing levels. So what we would propose is that the board conduct an overhire in 2026 to the level that you believe is appropriate. If it's 6 additional firefighters, then the board or the village would hire 6 additional firefighters in excess of the total budgeted number. And the intent would be that that would be offset by that overtime savings as it became available. So the board wouldn't budget additional funding toward the fire department for the purpose of that overhire. It would allow the board to add those positions, see the impact of those new positions on service delivery and on the overtime expense. And then if the board is still interested in kind of a structural commitment, it will give the community and the village time to catch up with those revenue streams as they become available to us, or identify other potential grant funding opportunities or different programming that could allow for sort of the permanent budgeting of that. And then if there is sort of, we enter into a recessionary period, or if there are other kind of impacts to the village budget that could require for the village to take a step back from, these costs, they're not permanently structurally implemented and wouldn't require a layoff to undo. And so this would allow for sort of a pilot of the program, give us time to identify those funding sources and still see those impacts to service and impact to the overtime expenses.
It's kind of like that. The full-time equivalency, 10%, which seems to be running, that's the 10% of the firefighters, and you're gonna use that money to pre-hire them so that you're not gonna charge the budget anymore. You're gonna just pay them out of that money you're not paying firefighters that aren't there.
I mean, not exactly, but the same concept, sure.
There's
sure.
another way of,
That's one way to look at it. So the intent would be to bring on the additional firefighters, hire them. The board passed an overhire ordinance actually last year in 2025 and has previously passed them in most years since about 2018. And so it would be to actually take advantage of that overhire ordinance to allow for really the board to pilot the program, see the impact to public safety, the calls for service, and then to see if those revenue sources are able to catch up or see if the overtime expenses are going down at the rate that's anticipated. Certainly, the board at any point could choose to add those positions structurally, but it does give an opportunity for us to, again, identify exactly how much funding is going to come to us via that new bill in Springfield. It gives us time to see real-time impacts to the overtime expense. And so it allows the board to meet its goals in terms of public safety, but also gives the board greater flexibility moving forward and doesn't put an additional pressure on the budget in terms of increasing the levy another 2%. So
I guess it functionally operates like a pilot program. It's like a pilot of a 6-person or 3-person or 9-person increase in staffing to see what the impacts would be while we're also looking at those structural revenue sources, because you're saying staff doesn't necessarily have enough data for us to be able to make those structural adjustments on revenue at this moment.
correct.
But the process of hiring doesn't slow down. You would go with the normal rate as if they were in the budget. And I mean, there's the reality that we're not likely to lay somebody off. Things-
Right, the
things
intent
would
wouldn't
have
be
to-
to lay off, right?
Yeah, so,
That's our goal.
so it does. All right, I'm processing, go ahead.
I have a question. I mean, the flexibility sounds good, sounds like it solves a lot of the problems. I guess I wonder, does that go both ways? Are the people who would be hired, that seems like a tenuous position? Are they
No.
not guaranteed? I mean, I guess
No.
say more about that.
So,
please.
so that's maybe how it's different than a pilot, right? So in terms of like, for instance, the ECHO program, that is a 2-year pilot program. Funding is appropriated for 2 years only. And after that, the village will have to structurally add those positions into, should we wish to continue that programming. When it comes to an overhire, right? So the intent would be that the village will express, hey, we want to add we want to overhire by 3 positions in '26. We want to overhire by 6 positions in '26, whatever the board's interest is. We would follow that direction. We would hire those additional staff. And then as positions became vacant through attrition, should the board not wish to maintain that higher level of service, those numbers would decrease over time. At the point when the board wants to make a permanent commitment to those positions, the board at any point during, future budget cycles or even off cycle at the will of the board could permanently add those positions into the budget on an ongoing basis. But in terms of those positions, they're not temporary positions. They're positions that are overhired in the department that would you would only reduce headcount in the department via natural attrition unless the board directed, maintain that overhire. So then you would replace, a retirement at that time.
So we could also, that wording, maintain an overhire, would prevent that situation of not ever actually reaching the intent of the overhire.
Correct. If the goal was to, say, maintain an overhire of 6 positions for a year, to see the actual impact to the overtime expense, and you wanted to get a full year's experience of that, if the direction of the board was to do that, then we would be backfilling any positions that allowed for the department to drop below their budgeted positions plus 6 or 3 or 9, whatever the will of the board.
Jim, unless were you done?
I was going to say something more, but Jim.
I just want to ask the chief's professional opinion here, what his take is on this approach and what his thoughts are.
Good evening, JT Terry, Fire Chief. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on public safety, and especially with the fire department. As we've discussed in several studies, and the overtime issue has come up, it is definitely a concern in different ways to approach, how we can address that issue. A couple other things I'd just like to add, and we've talked about it before, is this hiring process. The state changing their process is allowing us to hire quicker. So as we move forward with that, we'll come forward with our opinions and our thoughts on that. The closing of that 154-day gap of entry firefighter paramedics will also help reduce some of this overtime. So that'll definitely help. We've looked at wellness initiatives. We've looked at the amount of time that firefighter paramedics are at work, not at home. Not only the emotional strain, but the physical strain. So this will give us an opportunity to not only examine how we can reduce overtime, but give an immediate aid to our firefighters and paramedics and get them home, get them out of the firehouse and get them their recovery time.
So you endorse this approach?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
If this works for the fire department, do you see this being applied to other places in the village?
So we have used overhire previously within the village. We currently have an overhire in our Public Works Department right at this moment. It's working very successfully. This is a strategy that they've also tried to use in the police department, but because of just their staffing shortage, we're not able to attain that. Generally, the approach, like I mentioned at the beginning, in terms of overhire, is there's a goal to slow the, or to avoid sort of gaps in service, right? So there is a philosophy around that that is sort of the main intent of it. But using it in this way just creates that ability for the board to have that flexibility and to allow for staff to identify a permanent financial solution.
So does the village have a policy on overhire then?
Yeah,
Well, then, there's no change, it's just applying
I
it.
think we have to specifically imply,
Yeah,
or-
they have to-
Okay.
they have to-
yeah, so there is an ordinance for fiscal year '25 that's in place, but for fiscal year '26, the board would probably have to give us some more specific direction around the number in terms of how many you all would want to have to program.
and could we extend it for, is this a yearly thing? Can we do 2, 3 years?
That's the will of the board. So we structure that overhire ordinance. There's a standard kind of cadence to it that we have historically used, but I don't believe there's anything that would prevent the village from identifying a different way of approaching it, whether it's approving an overhire for fiscal year '26 and fiscal year '27 of 6 firefighters, 3 firefighters. You know, I don't think that would be a problem.
I would be supportive of doing an overhire of 6 firefighters for 2026, and as soon as we start to, as soon as we can examine those revenue sources that we've been discussing, having a finance committee discussion of those revenue sources and whether we would make a recommendation around those revenue sources to the board as a whole. I think that being able to both collect and analyze data regarding the impact on overtime from overhire and being able to look at capturing revenue in a way that's not going to negatively impact residents, but is instead going to either alleviate burdens or simply require nursing homes to actually manage their own lift assists or cover the costs of those. Those would be ways for us to look at structurally funding it beyond 2026, so that we can decide if we want to increase the staffing to the level of the overhire, or consider whether we wanted to go up to the 9, and we can look at that discussion next year as we collect this data and address the revenue sources.
I appreciate the creativity of this, and it sounds like it's something we've done before, so I'm also in support of the overhire. 6 seems like a good place to start, so I'm fine with jumping on that number. I know there were a lot of sort of competing theories about what would happen if we did this, and so I'm very, very curious, and I would love to get, as timely updates as we possibly can about how this impact is rolling out, as Trustee Straw said, because I want to see how it plays out and then act accordingly and solve the ultimate problem, which is there's a reason that this was brought forth to us, and so I want to see those issues that led to this conversation to be addressed. But yes, I'm in support of that.
So how long would it take to implement this, do you believe, currently?
So we currently are in the process of finalizing a firefighter paramedic entry-level list. Folks are on that list. We have to go through, of course, like the full background psychological portion of that testing period. And then we will be able to begin filling vacancies from that list once those parts are complete. So we would anticipate in January, we will start filling vacancies in the fire department. There are currently 4 firefighter paramedic vacancies. I am optimistically hopeful that we will fill all 4 from this current list. And then the goal would be to, if the interest of the board again is the overhire or just the addition of firefighters, we would be running another test in 2026 to, begin pulling from, or, there's a new process for more of a pooled testing approach. So our goal would be to fill immediate vacancies. If there are additional folks on that list who are available to be hired, beyond the 4 vacancies into those, into the, potential 6, then we would begin hiring those right away.
Okay, well, thank you. And so it'll take a bit of time to get it in the works. We won't see it impactful. I mean,
It will depend on the folks on the list. So most firefighter paramedics do have to go to academy. So that's about 12 weeks before then they are at the fire department. They do need to go through like a training period with a preceptor. So my understanding is that typically folks are at sort of 5 months before they count toward that staffing level. So you should be able to see impacts of those new additions by, the middle of 2026.
okay, quite a ways off. I mean, it's not tomorrow, certainly.
Just real quick, Trustee Tag, I'd like to add, like Director Chang said, the individuals that have been to the fire academy would have an impact a little bit sooner. So we wouldn't have to send them, so they would still have to go ride with the preceptor before they're cleared through. We have a very extensive onboarding process, but you could see that as soon as 2 to 3 months where they would be one-on-one, if you will.
Okay. I think just the one thought I have is that for the future, structurally, it's difficult in this area to look at fees. I think the fees for the people that fall, and it's a small amount, I would imagine. It's not a big amount. And I would never advise or recommend, our policy, I believe, if it's still unchanged, is if you don't have insurance and you're covered, if you're moved on an ambulance, we don't collect that debt from people, correct? We don't do that.
For residents, we do not balance
Residents.
those.
So if you're a resident, you do not. So that's a large sum of money, but it's not something this board or any board has ever considered, like implementing where we're going to collect from, because it's expensive. I was, of course, being the beneficiary of having been moved by the paramedics on more than one occasion. I was also moved into Chicago, and it was a $3,000 bill. So it's really expensive. Our costs, if you allocate them, are very high for that. But as a village, it's a great thing to have that service. And I would like to, of course, always see that be the case, where for residents, there's no fee.
If they're in a senior building, did we charge them? Do we charge the building?
That, I believe, is what Trustee Straw was referring to, is some of the, if they live in that facility, they're a resident. So the same, yes, sir, so the same rule apply. There would be an insurance bill submitted, and then anything that was not covered would fall under the balanced billing ordinance.
And that's an ordinance.
Yes, sir.
But what Brian was talking about is part of the Baker-Tilly report was a number of areas of which we could consider evaluating for fees that would just encourage good, responsible behavior to the extent that, somebody is in control. Meaning if you have somebody who is regularly falling and could be taking effort to be more careful, then false alarm, so to speak.
Right. Especially in facilities that have employees. So this is not uncommon. There's neighborhoods around here that have such fees that would be imposed, not on the resident. That needs to be addressed, not on the resident, but on the facility itself. So if they're choosing to call the Oak Park Fire Department to help their resident over and over, and they're not taking care of their resident appropriately, that's what I believe Mr. Straw was referring to. Please correct me if I'm wrong, sir.
Yeah, so to be clear, in some of these facilities, if there's a fall, rather than having staff people assist with lifting the person, getting them back to their bed or whatever, they will, my understanding is, call for an invalid assist, and it doesn't generate even a charge to insurance because it's not an ambulance ride to the hospital. Instead, it is our firefighters or paramedics going and doing that lift. And those can actually be things that can cause injuries at a higher rate too, because in many cases, the reason why the building wouldn't want to do an invalid assist is if this is a heavier individual, picking them up off the floor can drive up the insurance rate for the facility. And so shifting that burden to our fire staff is fiscally better for the facility. And so I don't think it's a lot of facilities where that's the case, but there are some facilities where several times a week our fire department is responding to those facilities. And decreasing that burden would decrease call volume, decrease injury, or if we're going to have that call volume, we can say beyond X number of calls per month, you're going to pay a invalid assist fee of what have you to offset the costs that those facilities are shifting onto the village by not carrying that insurance themselves and not either staffing or resourcing their staff in a way that they would be able to do those invalid assists in-house.
And we do that for alarms on homes, right?
Right.
If the alarm goes off too many times.
But if the home gets a charge, are they likely to pass that on to the resident?
The resident?
I don't know.
I
if
mean, I
that's-
think there's a longer review that needs to be had about all of the potential possibilities that were identified in the Baker Tilly report. But the board direction at the time that report was received was noting, as Trustee Taglia did, that the areas those strategies of which we would investigate are ones that we don't want to be focusing on our most vulnerable, right? We want to be, focusing on the ones that actually encourage responsible behavior. And so rather than, I think we're not. I'm not trying to cut off additional questions on the topic, but the truth is I don't know the whole anecdotal situations of these and which ones are then, as a professional assessment would have, that we would pursue versus not. There's a couple of things. Just, am I hearing that this is a recommendation from the Finance Committee?
Yes.
Okay, then, some of why, and I appreciate that you said it, Chief, is that this is coming to us is, addressing the fatigue and the exhaustion and the need for our firefighters to see their families and have time at home, as well as that overtime cost. The fact that we have such a high overtime cost does mean that that is disheartening because it feels like that is a problem. And so I would want to make sure that this, to me, I see this as a strategy more for how to identify that funding for that permanent implementation. But also, I do, respect giving you the opportunity and Village Manager Jackson for, what the strategy of deployment of your staff looks like to get to that optimal place and to know then what additional asks you might have of us in the future. But important that it's about maintaining and then reaching that level and also using the strategies that are in the reports of staffing up as quickly as possible it go long enough period of time that you actually have the data to assess this in reality. And, you know, so it does, if it takes 6 months to staff up completely, then I think it at least needs to be 2 years. But I imagine we might still have that ask with next year's budget season as to how many of those are already turning into budgetary full-time employee numbers that address that bottom line of number of full-time. You know, we're not looking to, so maintain and get there as quickly as possible and assess an appropriate amount of time and be making those more permanent decisions.
Yes, we can do that.
Let me ask a related question.
Yeah.
Just real quick. I won't be long. So, as we approach the final talks on the budget, I'm concerned about, and I want to talk to Kevin about the mental health awareness and our programs for both the fire and the police. And I know there were some adjustments talked about, and I just want to make sure that we have in our budget what is considered and what is acceptable in terms of mental health awareness and training and coaching for people that can really.
Sure. I can start by,
Chief can speak to that, and I think we are investing in that. I think we're absolutely prepared. But
I can start before Chief Johnson. A lot of it has to do with just open and honest conversation and addressing what were previously stigmas of mental health. Unfortunately, this is a dangerous business, and we see a lot of injured people and our friends and coworkers. And the times have changed, fortunately, where that's now okay to talk about, where, you know, in all honesty, previously it wasn't. So now it is. And I address that as the fire chief, that's a good thing, and it's a good start. We, as an organization, have looked at bringing people in that are not from the fire department because we want a different perspective. We want someone from the outside that can be open and honest, people will be honest with too. In terms of, you know, working with organizations, in the past couple of years, there's several crisis response teams that are staffed by first responders. And that's very important because there's an instant rapport. The individuals that our members are reaching out to for help know exactly what we're talking about, and we don't have to kind of, you know, build the background, if you will. And we've gone down that route for the past couple of years. It's not just the Oak Park Fire Department. The State Fire Marshal has also picked up on the change in the stigma and the programs that our individuals go to here at then from State Fire Marshal programs and other training, I guess, conferences or classes that they go to. So it's not just what we're doing internally, but it's where we're allowing and the opportunity that our members are finding to bring that back into the firehouse. That addresses some of your questions.
Yes, and so you're saying your funding is adequate for what you believe to be necessary services?
And if we find it's not, we will definitely come to you because, again, this is a priority for, you know, this village and definitely a priority for the Oak Park Fire Department.
Okay, and I don't know, does the fire department, I don't even know the answer, do they have a chaplain like they do in the police department or no?
We've had two over the past couple of years. One's actually a retired firefighter. So he can definitely relate to not only the fire service, but Oak Park itself. So we've had that opportunity. We don't have as many as Chief Johnson with the multiple denominations, but we have those connections in the
That's
past.
helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Chief.
Good evening, Shatanya Johnson, Police Chief. Our chaplaincy program is definitely will support the fire department in any efforts they may need. So it's not exclusive to the police department. We will definitely extend that to them. One of the things that the police department did this year was increased our budget slightly so that we can have an additional counseling session provided to our staff. Currently, we have a 1 hour mandated counseling session that they have to attend every year, and we established that before the Safety Act. As well as we have a therapy dog, we have peer support, we have other free opportunities that staff can participate in. One is a village-led that I'm sure the fire department has as well. EAP. In addition to that, we also have You Never Walk Alone, which is staffed by retired and current police officers, where you can call the suicide hotline, or if you're in crisis. In addition to that, within the police department, we have, I think I mentioned that already, peer support. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but sure.
So thank you for that, and again, don't hesitate to reach out to the board, both chiefs, if there's anything that comes up that you feel is necessary or needed or wanted in the area of mental health.
I'm sure I share the same sentiment as Chief Terry. We appreciate that.
Very good, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, this has gone better than I might have thought. So, appreciate the members of the Finance Committee and their thoughtful review of everything that ongoing discussions. Then that actually leaves the budget as is, largely, or in practicality.
With the
Fund, yeah, or the reserve funds, right, yeah, is that?
Right, but the levy stays the same.
yes, leaves levy as is.
And if there were considerations for deferments, then this would be the time to hear it. Do you have anything to say? I can share what was my thought, and I do think Bill McKenna is present, but I don't know where the support lies.
No, the only thought I had on this year is there was some discussion about the revenues and expenditures. I'd like to see, I know we're in October, past October 31st. The board would really like to start getting that update. I know it's probably forthcoming any time now. You probably did your cutoff and everything, so the sooner the better, because we want to make sure that as we approach the end of 25, that we're on track, or tracking closely. So that's all I want to say about that. And then if you want to.
Well, according to the ordinance, the Finance Committee would be for reviewing our amendments and quarterly reports.
Oh, okay.
So, and then, like I said, we still have those policy books to go through. Mm-hmm, yeah. All right. Did you have anything further?
Not on that topic.
Okay. Well, then, and maybe it's a moot point at this point, but I do still wouldn't mind talking through it just to understand, making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. The topic that I'm going to bring up is the idea of, and I'm sorry, Brian, this is going to be the first time you're hearing this, only because we didn't want to bother you over the last couple of days. The bike boulevard and spreading that over 2 years instead of just 1 year. I might be alone in this, but I still just wouldn't mind talking through it, because I've grown comfort with the idea, and I know that not all of my colleagues that are not part of the Finance Committee are not part of it. So I'm continually on all topics working to be respectful of these things. But like I said many times, as we approve these projects, we understand we've got tough considerations and we've got tough years ahead. My thought process, and I'm looking for you to push back on me to make sure I'm also understanding it fully correctly, okay? Is that if we took the bike boulevards, not those safety aspects at the corners of, that are part of Vision Zero and other areas of the bike plan that are about public safety, but the boulevard itself, and spread that out over 2 years, it's a significant savings in this particular budget, but deferring approximately $1.5 to $1.8 million to 2027. And so sorry, I'll just make sure that you always cover everything so thoroughly, I have no doubt. But, then that maintenance into the future, is that a challenge to consider if we do it all in 1 year? or is that not of huge concern? Is there a benefit to it being a two-year program instead of a one-year program?
Bill McKenna, village engineer. There's no real benefit besides the fiscal aspect to expanding the time length that we take to implement the Bike Boulevard system. Pavement markings last like 5 to 7-ish years. It's kind of a range. So, we're planning on like refreshing stuff and in that horizon kind of time period. So like a 1-year deferral for the, part of the remaining system wouldn't have any kind of like long-term operational benefits associated with it. When we presented those potential reductions of 5 million, 12 and 18, one of those reductions was a recommendation where we could take the Bike Boulevard system that we're planning on building out and finishing in 2026 and making that a 2-year project. We do have grant funds, so the recommendation at the time was to keep like $1.5 million level program for the Bike Boulevard in 2026. That would have us with a large enough project to fully realize the Cook County grant funds that we're getting, so we're not losing any grant funds. And then in 2027, you would have the balance of that project. We have been getting bids in for the recent Bike Boulevard system, have been coming in under budget. So, there's a potential that, we'll just see where bids come in, if that's the will of the board to turn that into a 2-year project. We'll build as much as we can with the available budget. So it may not even, we may not have to like defer as much work, right? It might not be split in half necessarily. But we can certainly, if the board wants, we would have like 1.5 million programmed out for 2026, and then the remaining balance, I think it's around 1.7 million then programmed out for 2027.
Does that potentially allow you to go for grants more than once? No idea.
It might be a little challenging because when we applied for the Cook County grant, the language at the time was that that was going to be the last project. Doesn't mean we couldn't try. I don't know how successful it would be because it kind of goes against what the intent was with this project, so.
If we were to take this approach, do you have an idea of what portions of the Bike Boulevard neighborhood greenways would be built out in 2026 and what portions would remain for future construction?
We would certainly have to look at it to see where we have overlapping capital work, because we wouldn't want to go into a road resurfacing program and not take advantage of that opportunity and stuff. But kind of the system that we still need to build out is a southern east-west route that would be like the Harvard, portions of Harvard and the Harvard bike lanes. And then there's a north-south route. We need to finish kind of the portions of the Lombard route at the far northeast, and then a north-south route at the far west part of the village. We would probably hold off on the north-south route that's generally along like Marion area like that. That's a newer recommendation from the bike plan that was done in 2025. So, there's definitely benefit to it, but, being a newer route, we already kind of have a lot of connectivity if we build out some of the remaining system for north-south to east-west and to get around the village and to get to schools. That route along Marion is really more for kind of commuters and people to get to our downtown, so it's less of, kind of younger people using it to get to school. So it probably makes sense to defer that portion of it.
You would leave the 2 protected bike lanes as a completely separate line item in the budget?
Yeah, we have a line item in the budget for implementing the bike plan. That's really more for dedicated bike lanes. Harvard is a little bit of a hybrid because we have those gaps near the school. And Harvard was originally part of the scope of the original Bike Boulevard when we went out for design. So we do have a consultant under design already that when we were designing out the whole boulevard, that we were just going to design the bike lane on Harvard and then the boulevard sections by the schools probably as one project. So we'll just have to look at that. We also, now that we're looking at our 2026 road program, we're going to be resurfacing portions of Augusta that have a proposed bike lane. So there's probably going to be some savings in that as well, because we had a line item for doing bike lane implementation on Augusta as like a standalone project. But now we're going to be resurfacing, so there's probably going to be some savings there as well. But short answer, if the board wanted to turn the Bike Boulevard into a 2-year program, we could certainly do it. There's no long-term impacts. It's about a $1.7 million savings for 2026, and then that cost would move into 2027.
So I'm certainly open to the idea of spreading it out. I think the part that's a little difficult for me is like I'd want to know sort of with a little bit more precision the network effects that would like I'd want to know like here's where we'd prioritize that money, because one of the things we've talked about repeatedly is how the connectivity is vitally important, and right now we've built out 2/3 of the Bike Boulevard's network that was proposed in the 2015 and actually previously in the 2008 bike plans. We built that out over the last 2 years. So we're 2/3 of the way done. The current budget would have us actually finishing the now 17-year-old project next year. But, you know, I do think with this board, I understand that this is a priority, and that it's going to be this same board at the end of next year going through this budget cycle, and I do believe that I can count on this board to actually come through and finish this project. So I am comfortable with potentially deferring some of it. I want to make sure that between the resurfacing that's going to be happening and where we're going to be allocating these funds, we're getting sort of as complete a network as possible, such that when we're coming back with the 2027 projects, it's just adding on the Marion leg that's the newer. It's adding on like specific sort of outerlying parts, rather than you know, oh yeah, there's this chunk in the middle where we knew we were going to be doing a project somewhere down the road. And I know you know this, but it's hard for me to just be like, we're doing this specific number, instead of like, here are the projects we're doing and why the projects make sense, and the projects that we'll leave for next time.
We could certainly use the Transportation Commission to help inform that decision. You know, if we have a budget number that we're trying to build to, we can come up with what we think that scope is, and then present that to the commission to get any input. If there's segments that they see as being more critical, we can adjust what we think we would be building in 2026 and use them as that sounding board.
Okay. I can accept, like, I can be comfortable with this, especially since, you know, I want to highlight that we are preserving funding for all the traffic signal optimization work, all of the Vision Zero recommended elements, and we as a board remain committed to finishing this program in the Bike Boulevard network in 2027. So I can.
The one thing I would want to add, just there's probably going to be a construction contract coming before the board in December. We were assuming that we were going to be building out the network, so we right now we're out for bid for all the flashing beacons for the whole boulevard system, for anything that isn't already installed. I think we would still move forward with stuff like that. You know, we can come back later and do additional striping and all that stuff like that. So we'll be treating a lot of those intersection crossings for the whole network, which is one of the kind of the biggest conflict points. So I think it'll be something that's doable. Cyclists will have a lot of safety benefits, but maybe it won't be a complete network, so.
Yeah, and those flashing beacons, there will be the push buttons on the street for the
Yeah,
cyclists.
these are the bike version for anywhere. There's some that are just PED for Vision Zero applications. We're trying to consolidate things into one contract, so.
I just want to make sure this wouldn't slow things down.
No, we actually, so from a design standpoint, the system's basically fully designed. The village board awarded a design contract to do the whole system, and so it's almost completely designed. We were just breaking it into multiple construction contracts, some for budget reasons to fit within budget, some from a constructability. So we had a striping and signage contract this year. We've got a contract to buy all the flashing beacons. And then we're going to be having a contract next year to do like the speed cushions. We had a real hard time finding contractors that were willing to do asphalt work, electrical work, striping work, and stuff like that. So we were breaking things into contracts just from a constructability reason, so.
One last question, and then I'm going to move and send it right to Derek, okay? Because I think, oh, Jim too? Oh, my bad. Is there, you put some effort into this document that we reviewed on October 7th. So when you came up with 1.781 and potentially and reducing to 1.5, is there any increased comfort to bumping that up just a little bit so that we know that the network, you have the dollars you need to have the network make sense?
When we looked at it from a reduction standpoint, we looked at what level of funding do we need in 2026 to not sacrifice grant funds. So the grant funds are predicated on a percentage of an overall project. So that $1.5 million recommendation for a FY26 budget is really, we can build a project and not sacrifice grant funds. We could always do more if the board doesn't want to do that full reduction of 1.7 million. We just never looked at it to that granular to see exactly what that number would get us. We were just looking, what is that minimum level of funding that we would need to have to not sacrifice grant funds?
So if there's an increased, I think I would ask maybe between now and when we present to the village board, if going up to 2 million for 2026 gives you that comfort of making sure that you've got a budget that is sufficient enough to not be burdened. Otherwise, you'd come for a budget amendment.
We could certainly do that when we work with the Transportation Commission to see what that $1.5 million investment gets us. If there is significant gaps in that we think we need to go back to the board and ask for additional money to kind of fill those critical gaps, we can do that.
So you would suggest a budget over like raising that dollar amount a little bit now?
I'm okay keeping it now and seeing where that gets us.
Okay.
And then we can come back to the board. We might also realize savings on projects by then too, where it's not necessarily a drawdown from fund balance at that point.
You are increasing my comfort.
Well, I just want to say if this moves forward as proposed, you have my word that 2027, the balance I would vote to fund the balance in 2027. I think it's, even though I voted against the bike plan as an overall project for other reasons, but this is a good compromise, and I think if it's helpful to even out some of the expenditures over time, it's good for the village. So thank you.
Yeah, it seems like there's consensus here, and I think that makes sense to me. I think, are we going for a particular number, President Skaman? I mean, is there a number that, like, and this is the question in my mind, is if we reduce this, I understand we're saving some money, but what does that mean, like, for us? It just reduces our debt service just enough to get to some special place, or is it kind of just like, well, can we do this? Let's just shave where we can.
This is more savings than I was ever imagining finding in going back to this document, but this was, as Brian said, they very did a great job separating out all of the traffic safety stuff, you know, and so looking at where we would, our resident is still going to see significant bike and infrastructure improvements. And the difference between, what they're going to, their experience is still going to be elevated. So it just seemed like something worth talking about. Quite honestly, I was not aiming for a number.
Okay.
I will just push back a little on that framing. I do think the bike boulevards are a bike and pedestrian safety
Yes.
thing. So it is separated out from the traffic signal work, the Vision Zero work, but the Vision Zero work does sort of speak to and incorporate all of the bike plan work. I do think that I do think though that given the exceptional capital improvement expenditures in 2026, there is some benefit to spreading it out over time, and so I can see that and I can appreciate that. But I want to push back on the framing of
I think you said it better.
separating out the safety.
I think that's accurate. I think you said it better, but the answer is no, I wasn't looking for a specific dollar amount. I was looking to just evaluate.
Okay. Yeah, I asked because, and I think I'm prepared for being pushed back on this. The only other thing I was like, well, and this might just be my newness and not knowing fully how it all plays into it, but I was wondering, like, is the traffic signal thing, it was on the 8 million sheet as a potential that could be deferred. Is that, but that is part of the Vision Zero rollout, and that those traffic signals, because it's about $600,000 for that upgrade. I think if I'm tallying it all up right with the planning is in addition to all the controller replacement and video detection, all that. But so is that, maybe you just tell me this is needed, and I'd be happy to back off, but I'm just curious.
Yes and no. So some of the signal work that we're proposing is to really get the most out of our traffic signal network. So improvements to the fiber optic system that we need to do so that we can actually get video feedback to the central management system, and also then like the video detection, so we can help those signals be smarter, be better at detecting cyclists, and improve kind of the efficiency of the system. They're not necessarily directly tied to Vision Zero. There are some things that do really relate back to Vision Zero, so you have ped signal improvements. Those are really shown in there so that we could start implementing leading pedestrian intervals that would tie back to Vision Zero for safety enhancements. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Some is infrastructure driven, but it's not necessarily things are falling apart. We just should be upgrading things through time to make sure we get the most out of the system and maintain that infrastructure. Some are safety related.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that was the only other thing, and I'm fine with keeping them in if we're okay with sort of spreading out the boulevard as was discussed. But I saw that as a potential place to save as well. But I'm willing to not recommend that.
I'm going to encourage my colleagues to listen to your explanation to help. But I do think it's still a conversation with Corey and Jenna and Brian and Chibike to have, respectfully so.
And I think some of those traffic signal sort of modernization improvements are necessary to support the improvements that sort of support the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like if we want to make our signals detect cyclists either extend green time, so a cyclist that is approaching the signal that where it would turn yellow and maybe they couldn't get through because the yellow timing's based on cars. You need a certain level of technology out there to do something like that. So there are safety benefits directly attributed to some of those things. Some is also just, we have older loop style detectors out there too, so there's infrastructure benefits as well.
Right.
It's mixed.
So, right now, the loop detectors is it only detects a massive metal object moving over it, a car.
Right.
If a bike rolls over it, you'll be sitting at a red light forever if you're there at certain times of day because it doesn't detect you, or maybe not forever, but sometimes like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we tweak them so that they can hopefully detect the cyclists, but they're not smart to know it's a cyclist. It just takes less metal to do it. So you can't change any timing based on it and stuff like that. And then not every signal has loops on all approaches. Like sometimes it's just in the left turn lanes. And so if you're a cyclist trying to actually just go with traffic in the through lane, there's no loop there to sense you then in that point where video can grab that whole broad area.
So I think that given that we are otherwise in the CIP plan prioritizing the Vision Zero improvements and that these light improvements will help as we try to sort of navigate improving safety and dealing with drivers who don't always love that, and doing the timing and the signal changes. It seems to me that that funding that is important, and it's one of the reasons why of the bike infrastructure pieces that we're talking about, I would be more in favor of the spreading the bike boulevard than I would be in deferring the infrastructure improvements to signal timing, because making those improvements earlier will support some of the future developments in the Vision Zero safety stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, so I'm good with that.
Okay, and I appreciate that you're saying you might actually be identifying savings as it is, so maybe this money even goes a little further than what you might originally have imagined.
That's part of what we do.
Yeah, we know, yeah, as well as always looking for grants. Did we do anything with the video streaming the last time, Brian? Is that still, that wasn't one of the things that we?
That was deferred.
That was deferred? Okay. Then. That was part of the 2.2 original. Okay, so we took a big chunk of this 5 million at the end of the day. So we really do appreciate the scrutiny that every department has had into presenting a responsible budget. And that's just evident in this as well as the conversations from before. Then congratulations, everybody.
We did it, right?
Well, we still have to convince 3 more people. Donna, do we have any questions on what we decided there?
No, I have it all written down, so what I will present on Tuesday, I will have the original budget, and as of like I did last year, I'll have an errata sheet that will show what is to be added, what fund is to go to, or what is to be decreased, so that we come with the ending number.
And thank you. And Bill, you don't have to walk back up, but I just want to say out loud that if you're working with the Transportation Commission and you do feel like there's additional funds needed, you'll bring it to our attention. Thank you. All right. Anything further, Village Manager Jackson?
No, thank you.
Any timing discussions or anything?
No, not at this time. I was actually inquiring a little bit about that, but I think I need to spend some time with it. So the schedule that we've talked about so far by making it to adoption on December 9th, I think continues. So I think, yeah,
Right, because we're presenting this to the village board at the next meeting.
that's correct. So, so next week and then again on December 2nd and then adoption on December 9th.
Right. And it is an opportunity for our colleagues who have an equal vote. It's noted that we don't actually vote at the committee level, it's at the full board. And so, but the work of this committee has been tremendous. This has been more finance committee meetings than we've ever had that I've been around. And so good job all, and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.